Well, a very good afternoon to you, wherever you might be listening to this webinar live, or perhaps you're listening to it on your favorite streaming service. Welcome to the Coaching Cafe. My name is Natalie Ashdown from the Open Door Coaching Group. And today we are delighted to welcome our dear friend and colleague, Anneli Blundell. Welcome to the line, Anneli.
Thank you so much, Natalie. It is my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so today we're talking about we're in a series of conversations now around the annual performance review. We're talking today about, is it a good time to ask for a pay rise? And we're thinking about, what do you need from your performance conversations? What do we need to get out of our performance conversations? And we are also going to dig into the gender penalty, turning obstacles into opportunities for women at work, which is Anneli's new book. And we're going to look at this, getting this pay rise, performance conversations from the lens of the gender penalty as well, which I think is going to be a fascinating conversation. So before we begin, let me acknowledge the traditional owners and the custodians on the lands in which we're all meeting today, or perhaps you're listening on this podcast, and their continuing connection to the land, the waters, the communities of Australia. We pay our respects to them and to elders past, present and emerging, and we always extend our welcome and our acknowledgement to the traditional owners of international lands on which you're joining us today. We know people join us from all around the world, and it's a pleasure to welcome you and to acknowledge your custodians of your international lands as well. So as we mentioned, we have an action-packed agenda for you today. I want to really focus on learning from Anneli, and we want to talk about annual performance reviews. We want to talk about pay rises, getting what you need, but also the concept of gender penalty. If you are new to the Coaching Cafe, welcome. We're all about creating a community, sharing learned experiences, thought-provoking conversations, and at the end of it, we offer free ICFC if that's what you're collecting. And if you are a regular, welcome back. You know that we love our Fridays together live, but we also love that you listen to the podcast on whatever favorite streaming service you have. It's really important to us that you join us, and we enjoy that. Please feel free to interact with us in the chat box as always, and we will pick up your questions as we go along as well. So I've mentioned, let me just close this screen as well. I've mentioned our dear friend and colleague, Anneli. We have known each other, I think, for over 15 years as well. Anneli, author of The Gender Penalty. I have it here in my hands, Turning Obstacles into Opportunities for Women at Work. When we were thinking about the idea of asking for pay rises, and I had been reading your book at the time, I thought, I need to get you on. Your experience in executive coaching, your experience in keynote work in this area. So thank you very much for joining us today. It's such a privilege to have you here, and I'm very excited.
Oh, Nat, the honour is all mine. And clearly, you know, we started working together when we were 10, just for the listeners who are
That's exactly right, yes.
And I have to say, there is nothing more that warms the cockles of an author's heart, which I know you would know, than seeing someone hold their precious baby filled with sticky notes. For those who are listening,
Yes.
He's holding up the book and it's filled with sticky notes. Thank you.
Yes, you're very welcome. Well, thank you, because I always say a sign of a good book is how many sticky notes, and I've run out of a whole pad here as I've marked up the book. And it's really important. A sign of a good book. I actually shared with you that I took extra time to read the book because I kept rereading and reading over it. So just trying to pick up your messages and your words, and such impactful commentary and discussion. So I want to first of all congratulate you on the launch of the book. It has gone Amazon #1 bestseller. So that is absolutely spectacular. Thank you. But I think what I want to thank you for, Anneli, is for your courage and your wisdom, your inspiration to put this very important topic into a book that now we can enjoy and share. So congratulations, but I want to acknowledge and thank you for your courage to put it into practice and put it into the words that we can learn from as well.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. And it really did come off the back of running so many women at work programs and having the same conversations and the same stories and the same anecdotes. And I'm just thinking, this is a broader conversation than this moment now. And, you know, what can I do to take these really important strategies and tools and make them more widely available? Because women are hungry. You know, we know what's going on. We hear what, you know, what the stats are, and everybody knows it's important to focus on gender equity, but people are still asking, how do I do this? Give me some practical strategy. So that's why I'm also really looking forward to this conversation, because I think we can have a really good practical conversation around how do you engage in a performance review, whether you're coaching someone through it, or you're being coached to have one, or you're giving one, or, you know, whatever hat you're wearing in the conversation. What is it that you can bring from this knowledge base, or that gendered lens, as you said, that's really going to lift your ability to have an effective conversation?
Well, it's exactly what we want to talk about. So thank you. And so there'll be people on the line who are coaching, managers to coach people. There'll be people who are coaches themselves. And so this is applicable for the entire audience. Let me just roll back a little bit. Let's just put this into context. So you're describing, you know, we know your background in coaching and keynote work, in particular with women. Could you just share with us that inspiration behind the book? You do share it in the opening chapter, but I'm really keen to hear your inspiration behind writing the book.
Yes. Hello, Natalie. My name is Anneli, and I am an accidental feminist.
Yes.
That's really one of the key things here, is that I never set out to be the woman's woman. You know, when I started my coaching journey, that's how I started my business. I've been running my business now for 17 years. I see you've got 20 years. Yay. I'm just a couple behind you. But when I started my coaching practice 17 years ago, the question I got asked a lot was, who's your target market, right? Who are you coaching? And at the time it was, do you have a pulse? Well, you're my client, because I don't know what's my expertise. I wasn't really sure on my angle. But what was clear was that lots of people who were entering the coaching field along with me had chosen their target market to be women. I coach women, I empower women. And I remember thinking, why? What is wrong with women?
Yes.
I thought, what is it that so many women need so much help? Like I didn't understand it. I didn't relate to it. I had a pretty good experience in the workforce. You know, I always thought I made my own luck. I created my own opportunities. You know, I really didn't relate. And then as I started doing more and more of this work, and I coach around the space of influence and engagement, communication, and I started noticing patterns. Things that my male clients were working on were very different to things that my female clients were working on. So as we move up the rung, you know, in organizations, and you move into the land of leadership, it becomes more about the perception of your performance than it is about your performance, right? So we assume everyone's competent, mostly, but men's authority was never questioned. You know, their leader-like qualities were never questioned. Whereas all these brilliant, talented women would come to me and say, my boss says I can do the job. Everyone knows I can do the job, but I keep getting feedback that I'm not leader-like enough. I don't exhibit enough gravitas or executive presence. So I need to boost my brand. And I thought, there it is. So society doesn't know how to value the strengths that women bring, because what women bring, or what they're socialized to show up with, doesn't match the model we associate with leaders, which is typically the male version of leadership.
Yeah, I feel like every time you open your mouth, Anneli, we just need to pause and let me take some notes. But because you're absolutely right, and I've been, since reading your book, I mentioned to you that I've always been aware of this, but now I'm aware. So it's really important from a coaching point of view that we are raising awareness here as well, which is one of our core competencies from a coach's point of view. And we have a great role to play in that. And I wanted to acknowledge your courage, as I mentioned, in presenting your ideas. And you said you wanted to go all in on this. Tell us about that decision. You're sharing the background, and I'm very keen to hear about that decision that you went, I'm going to do this.
Well, it was really because I was doing coaching work. And then, you know, typically when you start a coaching business, as we know from listening to your excellent podcast around the coaching industry, I think it was something like 95% of coaches offer another service, right? So you'll know if it hasn't happened to you already, it will. Your clients will say, oh, do you also run team strategy days? Can you also facilitate, train, lead, speak, author, etc.? So here I am finding myself, doing coaching, and then I'm seeing the same problems. I'm hearing the same issues. So I put together, in my mind, Natalie, I'm not kidding, a little talk on credible communication for women folk, like something to give them a bit of a leg up, because this might, address some of the feedback that they're getting that they can do something about straight away, right? Not that I think it's a female issue, but I know that at least this is something that women can take upon themselves to do. So this credible communication talk, amplifying authority in moments that matter, has gone bananas. I've been doing it for almost 15 years because women will not let it go. FYI, it's not just for women folk, it's for technical experts or anyone, who needs to speak English with gravitas, essentially. But what I noticed was there was such a hunger in the market for it. And then I was hearing all these women go through leadership development programs, and they came away saying, well, that's great, but the typical career advice that is offered for how to get ahead in the workplace doesn't always fit me. They say be more visible or put your hand up for more work, but I work part-time. So how does that impact me? Or I should just speak up more in meetings, but if I'm constantly interrupted, overlooked, or ignored, or discounted, how does that help me? So you need to talk about your strengths and showcase your achievements. But as a woman, I get a backlash if I brag. And I feel a little sick in my mouth, Anneli, every time I go to talk about how fabulous I am. So, there's so much cultural conditioning and taboo around women being able to not only claim their strengths and achievements, but talk about them. So I noticed this stuff was happening, which is why I created a Women at Work program to address. It wasn't for women. It wasn't to learn how to become a better leader. Enough research has shown that women are terrific leaders. They have a transformational leadership style. Brilliant. We need it right now. But it was to help women navigate a leadership landscape that was designed by men for men, and we have inherited it. And it's not the men's fault. It's just what we've all inherited. And to be honest, it doesn't really work for the men either. It is old. It's got to go. But that's how we came to be here today.
Yeah, thank you. And I acknowledge you for doing this, because it's such an important message, I think, today. I mentioned an article of my cousin who brought her daughter into work as part of the STEM program and work experience. And I wanted the interviewers to say, what's it like to have an inspirational mother who has paved the way in STEM? And instead, the interviewer said, what's it like to be able to hang out at coffee with your mum at work? And I'm like, oh, why can't we ask the real powerful questions, which is what you actually do in the book, and you raise our awareness. So it is around us, and the raising of the awareness, but they're doing something about it is what you're talking about in the book as well. So yeah, so Anneli, our series is around performance conversations, and it occurred to me very clearly when I read the book that the gender penalties that you describe in the book, they definitely play out when it comes to performance conversations. Not just for women, but for men also. It's around asking for pay rises, around putting ourselves forward. I was coaching a gentleman this morning who's missed out on 2 opportunities. I was coaching a woman yesterday who's missed out on opportunities. So this asking for pay rise during performance conversations, etc. I thought the gender penalties actually come into play. I wonder, could you elaborate? Tell us what we're talking about when it comes to gender penalties, and then perhaps elaborate on the relationship to performance conversations.
Yeah, of course. So the gender penalties are really penalties that women face when they act outside of their gender stereotype. And it happens, so the gender penalty, it's not the female penalty, it's the gender penalty. It actually means the penalties we face when anyone acts outside of their gender stereotype, right? So men also face the penalty. For example, men who show emotion in the workplace or who dare to cry in the workplace will get smacked with a very quick whack of the social backlash bat, boom, because that is acting outside of their gendered stereotype, right? Men have to have strong, stiff upper lip and all that jazz. So same thing for women. When women act outside of their stereotype, i.e. to be ladylike and try to be more leader-like, according to all their feedback and advice, they get whacked with the back that says, actually, you're a little bit ahead of yourself, love, or, you're trying to be more assertive and you're told, don't be so aggressive. Or you're told to be more visible, but you don't need to bang on about how good you are, darls. We don't like a woman who boasts. So it's you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, right? Because we want to fit into the gender box so we don't get a backlash, but then we don't fit into the leader box. So we try to move into the leader box, but now we don't fit into the female box or the lady box, right? Because we're not warm enough and we're not supportive enough or communal enough, and it's all about us. So it's a really fine line that women have to navigate to be seen both as for who they are and for the competencies they actually have. So I was doing a lot of thinking about this when you invited me onto the podcast to talk about the relationship between the gender penalty and performance reviews. I thought, so many, Natalie, so many, where to begin? But there was a couple that came to mind. So one is this notion that women tend to underestimate their abilities and subsequent performance. So we know this from research. Men have a tendency to overestimate their ability and subsequent performance, and women have a tendency to underestimate. So you think about that in a performance review. You're less likely to think you're doing well, more likely to think you don't deserve a pay rise, less likely to ask for the pay rise. I also think about the implication for self-assessments. Now, I don't know about you, but when I worked at the ANZ Bank, one of the trends at the time was that we were all asked to fill out our own performance review and give it to our boss. Yeah. And then they would obviously put their comments, agree, disagree, or whatnot. And I remember at the time filling in mine and my boss basically sending it back to me and saying, you have completely underrated yourself. I need you to do this again. And I need you to think more clearly about what you've done. For example, you've achieved X, Y, Z, and I didn't see that in there. So my estimation of what does good look like, what is excellence? Maybe it's this drive for perfection, where for me, to be a 1A or whatever your top score is, you have to be the best in the whole planet. But no, not really. So here I am as a woman underestimating my abilities and achievements, and men have a tendency to overestimate. So automatically, if I'm sending this up and my other colleagues are sending up their reviews to a boss who wasn't as thoughtful and wasn't as switched on as mine was and was busy and needed to quickly get through performance reviews because we know how that month goes, that we just go, yep, tick, 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 sign, sign, sign. So automatically I'm downgrading myself. So there's danger in asking people to self-rate, or if you are going to ask, or if you have been asked, just know that if you're a female, there will be a general tendency for the gender to underplay achievements. So possibly bump it up a little, be more generous, rate yourself as if you're rating your best friend who's done what you've done.
20% higher. 20%
higher, according to the pay gap. Exactly, 20% higher. Another thing I was thinking about was this idea of what do you claim, right? So, you're talking about pay rises and you're going with a business case, right? It's performance review time. Here are all my achievements. So, of course, there's the distaste we have for women who brag. Now, to be honest, in Australia, we don't really like anybody who brags, but we tolerate it more from men. We do not tolerate it from women, and women don't tolerate it for women more so. So the fact that it's really hard to brag can be one thing, but it's also a question of what are you bragging about? Here's an interesting stat. So women are 40% more likely to be assigned office housework. Office housework, invisible work, non-promotable work. These are all the same terms for the same work, and that is getting the coffees, taking the notes, finding the room, booking the lunch, organizing the Kris Kringle, organizing the birthday cards. Let me ask you, who was the last person in your office who organized any of those things? Was it a woman? chances are 95% of the time it was a woman. So women are more likely to be volunteered to do that sort of work. And in the absence of people putting their hand up, a woman will put her hand up. And it's not just men who are volunteering these women, it's men and women, because it's all about how we're conditioned to take up these roles. And women have been conditioned to be the good girls, to play nicely with others, to be that team player. You don't want people not to like you and think you're not carrying your own weight. So if you're thinking about what have you achieved, you could have been sitting on 7 committees, 3 focus groups, helped with the office move, done all these things that have taken up your precious time, but are not the sexy pieces of work that shift the dial against the strategic agenda of your organization. So be really careful around what you say yes to, because you have to know that you need to be able to claim the value of that work against organizational outcomes.
We're just going to pause and let that one sink in.
Pause for effect.
Absolutely.
Let that sink in.
And for those of you who are playing along at home and might have purchased the book, because some people have purchased it while we've been talking, Anneli, which is lovely to hear. Yeah. Penalty 3, boasting. So we're heading to chapter 3 there to talk about boasting and how that is actually seen from a gender perspective, how we show up and how we perhaps perpetuate that ourselves. We're thinking also then about how we might be coaching people then. So if with this kind of information in mind, what does it mean from a coaching point of view, do you think?
Yes, that's a great question. No, that's a good question. I was already thinking, so one of the strategies I've got in the book under the chapter for the boasting penalty, right, which is we don't want women who boast, therefore women stay invisible. We can't claim our achievements because we don't know how to talk about them. So if you are in a performance conversation, instead of saying to a woman, what have you achieved? Or if you're the woman or you're coaching someone for this, instead of saying, what have you achieved? Ask instead, what are you proud of? What are you proud of? Because one of the strategies I have to be able to increase your visibility. So I also changed I want to reframe our relationship to boasting. And I encourage people to think of it as boosting. This is about boosting your visibility, right? Not boasting about how good you are. It's about boosting visibility. So one of the ways to boost visibility about your accomplishments is to enroll people with passion. So here's the difference. It looks like this. Well, we delivered project 20-year anniversary, and it went well, and we came in under budget, and things went really well. You can see I'm struggling to boast. I don't want to talk about it, so I'm just giving you the basic facts. Compared to, we delivered on project 20-year anniversary. I'm so excited. I am so proud. You know, we were up against it from the beginning. People told us, you're not going to get this through because the last 7 projects have been behind budget and over time. And I'm so proud that we were able to come in within budget, within time. And not only that, we created a framework that other people can now use to ensure that they're also coming in under budget and on time. I couldn't be more proud.
Massive difference. You can hear it. And I'm hearing all the coaching questions we could ask. So what are you passionate about? How are you going to communicate your passion? What are you proud of? How can you bring that forward? What's your key message you also want to convey as part of that? So there's lots of Paul has jumped in. What project did you have most fun? Like what was it that was fun about it? But also what's the link between that and the strategic outcomes that you talked about? So there's so much that we can do from a coaching point of view to bring out that passion, but then communicate it, as you've been talking about, Anneli, in the way that's going to be beneficial, and not boasting, as you said, but boosting. What a great reframe. Yes.
The other thing to think about when it comes to performance reviews is, you know, this is really the time for feedback, right? So you think it's time for feedback. Maybe you've done a 360-degree feedback as part of the process, or feedback is definitely part of it. Either it's stuff that you've had, dialogues you've had through the year, or in this moment right now. And what I noticed as a pattern was a lot of the women that I was coaching, and certainly now in my group coaching with the Women at Work program, is women are confused by the feedback they're getting because it's coming from a gendered lens. So men typically, first of all, get feedback on their business acumen, i.e. how to be a leader. Women get feedback on their communication, how to sound like a leader. And so it's really interesting. And also they tend to get more vague feedback, like, we need you to be more leader-like. We need you to have more executive presence. No one agrees on what that means. Could we stop using these nominalizations and just give us something concrete? So we're getting this feedback. So I've got women in my programs who say to me, you know, at first I was told I'm too quiet. I need to speak up more. I need to have more gravitas and be more authoritative. So I started to do that. I started to share my opinions. I started to push back. I started to speak my mind. And then I got the feedback that now I'm just putting people off. Could you just tone it down a little bit? You know, you need to keep people on side, and, you know, you're just a bit too much for people. And these women are going, I'm too hot, I'm too cold, I'm too big, I'm too small. Like, what do you want from me? So I want people to think about, where are you getting the feedback from? Is there a gendered lens to this feedback? i.e. check for consistency. If that's the only person who's giving you that kind of feedback, but no one else gives it to you, I'd say it's more around them and their gender perspective. Is this useful feedback? Is this something you can actually do something about? How concrete is the feedback? Have you had a deep discussion around, what does gravitas mean to you? What does being more authoritative look like? If I were to videotape that, what would you notice me doing differently? These are all really useful questions to dig down into the heart of potentially confusing or conflicting feedback that you might be getting as a woman.
Oh, thank you. Like I said, we need to pause and write all these questions down, because they're important from us from a coach's point of view if we're coaching people, but also to reflect on. And I also was thinking, as you were saying those questions as well, that we all, in particular, and women, as we're talking about, particularly during this period, can really beat ourselves up over feedback we receive. So asking those questions is a way of not going into that beat ourselves up loop. Yes, maybe we're not good enough after all. Maybe what the feedback is that I'm receiving is actually true. I'm like, no. I asked a woman just yesterday in a coaching session, but what's the truth here?
Yes.
What is the truth? And the truth is, you delivered an amazing project that did X, Y, Z, and yes, you missed the financial target.
Yep.
But you know X, Y, Z. So she, and anyway, I could go on and on and on. But the truth is that things that were outside her control prevented the financial target from being met. That's the truth. The goalposts were changed.
Yeah.
But she's beating herself up and got beaten up and humiliated in a meeting over the financial target. And it's very confronting when that happens, obviously. So the debrief was about what's the truth. So this feedback, as you say, was inconsistent. It's not true. Yes, you missed the finance. Well, yes, the project, not you.
Yes.
So this is the other thing I noticed too, the lens I've been noticing, and we're right on time now, but we've got to be careful about that personal you didn't achieve the target. It's actually, and so, you know, decrease in performance because we focus on personal negativities or weaknesses. So, so much to talk about. Anneli, final messages for us. What are you thinking? I mean, we can talk for a long time and we will have you back. I've already made you agree to come back and talk to us.
Yes. And I have definitely agreed.
I didn't want to direct and tell you that we need you to come back.
No,
but,
that's right.
you know, you will come back and talk to us more, which is wonderful. And we've got so much to learn from you. But what are those final messages you want to leave us with at this point? Apart from, I'll give the message, you need to buy the book, yes.
Okay. You can do the boasting for me. I appreciate that. Thank you. Well, if I tie it to the idea of performance reviews, and if you're a woman in the middle of a performance review conversation, I would say be clear on your value. Be clear on your achievements. benchmark yourself against what other people are doing so that you get a clearer, fairer idea of what value actually looks like, right? Because we tend to discount and all those things. So if it helps you to benchmark, you'll be able to claim and own what you've achieved more congruently.
Yeah, there's those questions I need to send to this client I was coaching yesterday. It's like, let's talk about the benchmarks. She knew about it, but she needs to be able to communicate that as well. So thank you. Well, Anneli, it's been an action-packed conversation. There's so much more that we can talk about. What I am very keen though is people understand where they can buy your book, and also you were sharing with me that there's additional resources that come with the book, and of course you piqued my interest in a coach's playbook. So please, can you tell us about that as well?
Well, if you do want to buy the book, obviously, look, QR code, boom, Amazon.
I'll get out of the way, yes.
Yeah. If you're listening to this, you just go to Amazon, you'll find it there. I've also put a gender penalty quiz up here if you want to QR code that, so that you can find out which of the 5 penalties are most, salient for you in your work at the moment. But what I've done is I've done a whole bunch of digital resources. So I wanted to make this practical and useful. And, I am a coach, so I cannot help myself. So some of the resources are around a chick chat club. So basically a book club. Whole bunch of questions in there that take you chapter by chapter to start discussing and socializing these ideas. You can use them as coaching questions, FYI. I also added in there a coach's playbook, which is women can read this book, take a summarized version of a couple of key points of each of the penalties, take it to their boss and say, hey, can we have a discussion about things that women are facing in the workforce? If, for example, I noticed these 3, let's discuss. And here's a couple of bullet points around how you can support me as a woman in the workforce. So it's literally a playbook that your coach in the workplace can help to support you and your career with.
Well, thank you again, Anneli. Thank you for heightening, bringing the awareness to the conversation. I'm hoping that the coaching questions, the book, everything you've talked about, just even this snippet is going to make a massive difference to women and to men, to everyone in the workplace, in terms of how we move forward with annual performance conversations and how we take that coaching approach to annual performance conversations. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you. You are a superhero in this regards, and we really look forward to hearing more as we go along our journey as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nat. Pleasure to be with you always.